Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating piece of source material. We're unpacking the wildly popular Daily Jesus devotional and breaking down its incredibly structured approach to morning mindfulness and spiritual connection. Whether you're already deeply familiar with these concepts or, just curious about how millions of people structure their daily spiritual routines, we're going to map out exactly how this practice actually works. The text kicks things off with this totally compelling, honestly kind of convicting question. Think about your typical morning for a second. The devotional creates this incredibly sharp contrast right out of the gate between the absolute chaos of our digital devices, the doom scrolling, the rapid-fire emails, and a quiet, waiting spiritual presence. It essentially argues that before you answer a single message, there is a presence already waiting to meet with you. So here's our roadmap for today. First, the morning invitation. Second, biblical blueprints. Third, walking in the Spirit. And finally, power, comfort, and liberty. Okay, section 1, the morning invitation. The devotional gets super specific right off the bat, clarifying exactly who we're talking about here. It describes the Holy Spirit as the third person of the Trinity, but more than that, an active helper, a comforter, and a guide. The source is adamant that this is not just some vague feeling or, an impersonal force floating around. It's a presence that waits for an invitation rather than just forcing its way into your life. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the text frames the modern morning rush as a literal physical barrier. The argument is that if you start your day with worry, if you're immediately stressing over traffic or immediately tackling your schedule, you're basically leaving yourself to carry the weight of the whole day entirely alone. The Spirit isn't going to compete with the noise you've already let in. You have to intentionally create that space and extend the welcome before the rush even begins. All right, moving right along to section 2, biblical blueprints. To build its case, the explainer points straight to King David from the Old Testament. The source highlights that David didn't just pray when things eventually calmed down or late in the afternoon. No, he committed his very first voice in the morning to God. And the devotional uses this to reinforce an absolutely crucial principle. David lifted his soul before he lifted his sword. Basically, whoever wins the morning sets the tone for your entire soul for the rest of the day. And to really emphasize the absolute necessity of this habit, the source looks at the ultimate example in this tradition, Jesus. The text notes that even Jesus, amidst incredibly heavy ministry demands and crowds constantly pulling at him, actively retreated to a solitary place long before daylight. The logic here is super clear, right? If someone with that level of divine connection needed to carve out the morning just to seek direction, well, everyday people facing daily stresses absolutely must follow that exact same pattern. Next up, the source points to the Old Testament story of Bezalel. He was the guy tasked with building the sacred tabernacle. The text outlines this very specific divine order of operations. According to the devotional, before Bezalel cut a single piece of wood or hammered any gold, he was filled with the Spirit. So the big takeaway is that spiritual filling has to precede physical skill and practical work. If you want the harvest, if you want the results, you can't just rely on your own strength. The spiritual connection literally has to come first. And honestly, these figures brilliantly illustrate the diverse precedents set in the text. You've got Moses flat out refusing to move without God's presence, Bezalel getting practical, supernatural skill, Simeon obeying a tiny, quiet inner nudge, and Stephen finding total peace while under attack. Together, it's like a masterclass in how this devotional operates. It's showing us that welcoming the Spirit applies to literally every facet of life: leadership, daily work, timing, and even crisis management. Right, on to section 3, walking in the Spirit. The source draws a really sharp, practical contrast here. On one side, you have human ability. The text argues, and I think we can all relate to this, that trying to get through the day on natural energy, your third cup of coffee, and sheer willpower, it's a guaranteed recipe for eventual burnout and bitterness. But on the other side, walking in the Spirit is framed as operating with supernatural provision. So when things get hard, like when that frustrating email inevitably arrives, the text says you shouldn't fall back on your own flesh. You rely on this cultivated, quiet spiritual boldness. This whole concept of daily joyful surrender shifts the practice from just a simple morning hello to a continuous all-day partnership. It starts at sunrise with a short, sincere prayer, and it stresses that no perfect words are needed here. By midday, your goal is to keep your inner ear constantly awake, obeying those quiet promptings. And finally, by sunset, the practice asks you to actually look back and recognize how that guidance shaped your day. to see what the text beautifully calls the Spirit's fingerprints. The devotional uses a story of Simeon to really drive this point home. Simeon went to the temple not because it was on his calendar, but because he followed a quiet leading. And as a result, he ended up holding the Christ child. The text explains that saying yes to small, quiet promptings, like, just pausing to pray, or speaking gently to a stressed coworker, or even just holding your tongue, it might seem totally insignificant in the moment, but that continuous string of small yeses positions you for profound, orchestrated encounters that you would have otherwise completely missed. Bringing us to our final section. Section 4, Power, Comfort, and Liberty. According to the text, the Spirit supplies exactly what the human mind cannot produce on its own. And this promised impact, it's wide-ranging. We're talking supernatural power for tough situations. We're talking a comfort that actively intercedes when you have unspoken pain and literally cannot find the words to pray. It also promises profound liberty, freedom from fear, from the opinions of others, and from heavy old habits, alongside really practical wisdom for everyday stressors like tense meetings and strained relationships. Recounting the intense story of Stephen, who was facing a hostile, angry crowd with stones in their hands, the source makes a really bold claim. It promises that welcoming the Spirit grants believers a profound, unshakable peace that external threats simply cannot steal. Because Stephen was filled with the Spirit, he saw heaven open, rather than just the immediate, terrifying danger in front of him. The ultimate takeaway? This practice is meant to literally change your vision, giving you the ability to see right past immediate troubles. And the overarching thesis of the entire devotional culminates right here, in a crucial shift in perspective. The text stresses over and over that this morning routine is not just a dry religious habit or a chore to check off your list. You aren't begging God to do something new. Actually, it's a holy invitation where you are simply stepping into and agreeing with what has already been promised to those who willingly extend a welcome. The explainer then concludes with this massive, all-encompassing prayer that covers virtually every single aspect of human life. The speaker leads the audience through releasing old grudges, claiming protection over family and mind, invoking financial breakthrough without manipulation, commanding physical and mental healing, and entirely canceling out darkness and confusion. It's a really remarkable showcase of total vocal reliance on divine authority to order the day. So, given the profound daily impact and all the rich historical precedents detailed in this source material, we are left with one vital question to ponder tonight, before the sun rises tomorrow. When you wake up, before the noise starts, before you even reach for that screen, how will you begin your next morning?